Rating the 2023 F1 drivers from worst to best. Today, we are going to be recapping 2023, firstly, with this podcast, which is a 20 all the way to numero uno of our driver ratings over the course of the whole year. So this isn't us saying, well, I think in 20th is blah, blah, blah. No, our opinions have been jotted down throughout the entire year, and these are the averages, aren't they, Tommy?
Yeah, we've gone for average grade across the year, which I think is a good way because it gets rid of a bit of recency bias, which I think is always a bit of a problem in Formula One. And if someone's been amazing at the start of the season, then they still get the credit they deserve.
Okay, let's dive into P20, shall we? My P20 on average is Nick de Vries with an average grade of 3.3. Now, I do genuinely think on reflection that Nick de Vries deserved a whole season. He wasn't upside down every single race. He just was struggling to get to grips with the car. But we know what that Red Bull family is like. And when there's a queue of drivers knocking on the door saying, excuse me, can I have a seat? They will make changes if they don't think the driver is delivering to the level in which they expect. And I personally believe that may have even happened at some other teams, Williams, if they actually had drivers perhaps waiting, knocking on the door. So, yeah, unfortunate for Nick de Vries, but I'm not surprised he's there.
Nick de Vries is also in P20 for me. I've gone for, my average grade is 3.7, which is a bit better, but still not great, is it? And it was, of course, harsh to get rid of him, but I think you could argue the two people that replaced him, in Daniel Ricciardo and Liam Lawson, showed they did a much better job straight away, particularly Lawson, who was indeed a rookie himself. So it was harsh, but I personally think they made the right decision there based on how those guys did. So, yeah.
Let's move to P19. And for me, it's Kevin Magnussen with an average grade of 4.4. I was surprised because I thought that Magnussen, Hulkenberg, I thought, very similarly experienced and both have had great drives in them, that they would have been sort of nipping at each other's heels. But no, Hulkenberg has been a lot better. So Magnussen, P19 for me.
P19 for me is Logan Sargent with a 4.5 out of 10. Yeah, Logan didn't have the best season, to say the least. The Williams is not a bad car, as we've said many, many times this year. And Logan didn't have that excuse anymore of being like, well, the Williams is rubbish, say like Latifi or whatever, where, oh, well, he was never going to get points anyway. That Alex showed that car had a lot of points in it. And Logan didn't deliver.
P18 for me is Logan Sargent, also with an average grade of 4.5. He's had some crashes, he's had some mistakes, he's not been that quick, and he's had a whole season under his belt now to have proved at least once or twice in qualifying that he had a bit of potential in him. But for me, getting whitewashed by Albon and then only scoring points when people were getting disqualified, it's not a season that, as a rookie, where you're trying to really prove your worth, he didn't really do that. And I wouldn't be surprised if James Vowles gets rid of him for next year.
P18 for me is Kevin Magnussen with 4.5 as well. I know the Haas was woeful, but he didn't have those moments like a Hulkenberg did where he put it in qualifying and showed what they could do there. Yeah, Magnussen, really disappointing. But there's, to be fair, not much he could have done in that Haas, but I did expect a lot more from him.
P17, I have Zhou Guanyu with an average grade of 5.2. In my opinion, he should be beating Bottas, who's in the twilight of his career. He's just having fun. So Zhou, as a new driver to the scene, he is new, should be beating Bottas comprehensively, in my opinion. But he hasn't done that. He's had the odd moment for sure, but not enough for my liking. I know he's quite restricted by the Alfa Romeo. But yeah, not a good enough season, really, I would say, for Zhou. If he wants to start moving forward more, get on the radar of other teams, quicker teams. We'll see. We'll see if next year it can get any better, but I don't hold out too much hope.
P17 is Zhou Guanyu for me as well. 5.3 average score. He's almost gone into that Antonio Giovinazzi role that we had before, where we were talking about, look, he needs to beat his more experienced teammate to prove to other teams. Like, he's not absolutely terrible, but there's just not enough spice. There's not enough interesting races, and it's a shame for Zhou Guanyu because, hasn't seemed to really improve, and it's just been a very meh season from him.
P16, Lance Stroll, with an average grade of 5.2. If I was to just, sit down and go, right, who's had terrible seasons? Where would I put Lance Stroll? Maybe P16 with recency bias would make you think that's quite harsh, because my last 3 grades for Stroll are 996, which you'd think, if he's had a season like that, he's going to be right at the top. But he's also had a 1 from me in Monaco. He's had a 0 from me in Singapore. I don't think you can really debate the fact that whether or not he has talent. I think he does. He shows it on the odd occasion. He's done it years ago, taking pole in Turkey and getting the odd podium here and there in crazy races. But I feel like as time has gone on, the Formula One experience perhaps just feels a little bit, gets a bit normal and maybe won't try as hard. This is just me making, kind of estimating what's going on here, but I can't see what else, because I do think Lance is a talented driver, but he just hasn't performed.
P16 is also Lance Stroll for me as well, with a 5.4. I totally agree with you. This is why we've done the average grade, because P16 maybe sounds a bit harsh, but because he's done all right recently, but when you actually think over the course of the whole season, he has been very bad for a very long time. What was his after the summer break? It took him forever to get just into Q2 because it had been so long, and just a season to forget for Lance, definitely.
P15, Valtteri Bottas, with an average grade of 5.3. I expected more from Valtteri. He used to be, and I think maybe this comes back to my point of the mentality's changed for him now, but he used to be a qualifying specialist. That was the time where he really could take it to Hamilton at Mercedes. But just a very mediocre, subpar performance and season from Valtteri, and perhaps he is just having a great time. In which case, I'm happy for him. But there will obviously be conversations if this continues going on for the next few years of, okay, he should probably, let's get a young talent in now. Let's see what they can do. Is poor harsh, P15? Yeah, it was reasonably poor this season for Bottas, in my opinion.
P15, I've also got Valtteri Bottas with 5.6. Yeah, it's so hard to really discuss about his season. He's had the odd flashes of, not greatness, but good races, I'd say, where I think that's what sets him apart from Zhou Guanyu, where he has shown that the car sometimes has a great quality result in or something like that. But ultimately, you do expect more from him. I think we've mentioned this exact phrase before, but he is in very much the Kimi Raikkonen stage of his career where he's just chilling and enjoying himself, but only 3-point scoring finishes. Sorry, 4-point scoring finishes all year.
Is not put some respect
great
on his name.
Sorry,
Tommy.
How dare I?
Goodness gracious, mate.
A whopping 2 P10s, 2 P8s. What more is there to say?
P14, Nico Hülkenberg with a 5.4 average grade. I feel like he was a lot more restricted by the car than perhaps his season suggests. If you look at it on paper, you go, he's had some reasonable performances, but always fallen back after qualifying. But I think he's genuinely just hampered by that car, and maybe I feel a little bit harsh by the fact that he's down in P14, because I feel like he's done everything he possibly can in a lot of weekends, but just can't go a full race distance without his tyres falling off. Hülkenberg, I think if Haas can improve their car next year and actually have something that doesn't just turn up on a Saturday, I think Nico Hülkenberg will trounce Magnussen even harder, I think.
P14, I've also got Nico Hülkenberg, 5.9 out of 10. it's so hard to judge if Nico Hulkenberg was the GOAT this season, had the greatest season of all time, and we'll just never know because the Haas was so bad. Because at the end of the day, he put that car where it shouldn't be in qualifying, in my opinion, and then just dropped back in the race. So then you go, and then when we're grading, we always had the same discussion every week of like, well, what can he do in that car? And he's done everything he could in qualifying and then inevitably plummeted to like 14th, 15th. But is that his fault? How much do you judge it? So it's a very difficult one.
P13. Brace yourselves. Sergio Perez with an average grade of 6.1. I don't even think it's that harsh, to be honest with you. I think when you look at the face of it, you go, he's finished second in the championship and he's the 13th best driver. Maybe on paper, when you read those two things, you think, wow, that is pretty harsh. And also, the first four grades that I gave him was an 8, a 10, a 6 and a 10. And he's ended up 13th best on our average gradings. But yeah, I think Perez, he's kept his seat. Will he keep his seat next year if teams and drivers catch Red Bull and Verstappen can't win the Constructors' Championship on his own? That's up for debate. But what Perez can probably say is that it's not been the best season. He lost the feeling with the car. And you see that. It's the most pronounced flop, I suppose, because of the fact Verstappen's in the fastest car. And then, of course, he's going to be there in the spotlight as the second driver, being expected to finish second or on the podium every single weekend. And he didn't.
P13 is Sergio Perez for me as well, with an average of 6. Yeah, of course, he started the year incredibly well. Got a couple of wins, and we were talking about, is he going to do a Rosberg? Because if Max is having failures, but instead, his season just got worse and worse, and it kind of spiraled to get worse and worse. And at the end of the day, people may think that's harsh, but you have to take the car performance into account with these things. And Sergio Perez has finished, closer to Nick de Vries in the World Championship than he has to Max Verstappen, and that says everything you need to know, really, even though he's finished second.
P12, Esteban Ocon with an average grade of 6.3. It just chopped and changed between him and Gasly in terms of who was the quickest, and I don't know, I feel like Ocon maybe left a bit on the table in some races and got quite a few very average sort of 4, 5, 6 out of 10s. Was he the 12th best driver of the year if I was to redo it? Maybe. He's around sort of the outskirts of the top 10, maybe just outside of it. So I don't think it's too harsh for Esty Bestie to get 12.
P12, I also have Esty Bestie with 6.4. Yeah, Ocon, Monaco, obviously the highlight. Was absolutely fantastic there. But then, surprisingly, particularly because I said a certain Pierre Gasly would be the biggest flop of the year, I think Ocon's been outperformed by Gasly throughout the year. And that's shown in the points, even though it felt like Gasly got maybe screwed over more than Ocon did. And Gasly's still beating him in the World Championship. So it's one to forget for Ocon, really, in Alpine. P12 is kind of really summarises their season, where they're just kind of not good enough for the top 10, not bad enough to be at the bottom. 11th place, Yuki Tsunoda with an average grade of 6.4. I don't think it's been a bad year for Yuki. He's not had as many mistakes, I would say, as perhaps we've seen in the years when he joined Formula One. Of course, he's now up against Daniel Ricciardo, an experienced driver, and he's held his own against Danny Rick, I would say, since Danny's come in. And I think nothing crazy. I'm not saying Yuki Tsunoda's going to be world champion anytime soon, but he has delivered when that AlphaTauri, well, not all the time, but when that AlphaTauri could score points, which wasn't often. Yuki Tsunoda in P11 for me as well with 6.4. Exactly the same. I promise we don't just agree on everything. It will change, don't worry, it's coming. But yeah, name a more iconic duo than Yuki Tsunoda and P11, because it seemed to happen a lot. But yeah, he's had a very up and down season. but I think he's made a lot less mistakes than he used to do. But yeah, Yuki Tsunoda, I think it's fair to put him P11 because he's had a good season, and I think he's definitely getting better and maybe rewarding AlphaTauri for putting a bit of faith in him because he's definitely getting better.
Okay, we're now into the top 10. Why don't you start, Tommy, for this half?
Okay, so P10, the average score is George Russell 6.5 out of 10. Yeah, George hasn't had the best of years. And he did start the year quite strongly, but there was that stage in the middle where it really didn't feel like he was getting the most out of the car, and Hamilton was just consistently putting in podiums and really good results, and George was like dropping further and further behind in the points. So yeah, it's all very close between these drivers though, but George is P10 for me.
My P10 is Pierre Gasly with an average grade of 6.6. Yeah, he had some pretty brilliant performances. You know, Zandvoort, he got given a 10 out of 10 there, and overall, I think he can be very proud of his performance, especially towards the end of the year. From sort of Austin, he's been performing very well indeed, and yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Obviously, that Alpine weren't really fighting anybody apart from just trying to score points towards the end of the year, and nothing really would change there. But yeah, Gasly, I think solid.
P9, Pierre Gasly with a 6.7 average grade, and I think Gasly's quietly had a good season. I think he's shone more than Ocon in a car that's been difficult to show. The Dutch Grand Prix is the one that stands out. P3 is absolutely amazing. And then a couple of sixth places as well. Even in Vegas, he was doing very well in the last two Grand Prix, running in the points, but got screwed a bit by strategy and some bad luck. And yeah, Gasly looks like he's got on top of that Alpine now and looks the stronger driver than Ocon, which is something I didn't predict, but fair play to him. He's definitely done a very good job.
P9 for me is Oscar Piastri with an average grade of 6.6. Oscar Piastri, I think overall has had a very impressive rookie season. I think Silverstone was the big sort of turning point for him where he was there and we all kind of expected him to fall away from that fight between Norris and Verstappen, but he didn't. And then he got a little bit unlucky and should have been on the podium. And yeah, since then, he kind of, just delivered almost week after week. Qualifying has been really impressive from Oscar. Race pace has been a bit of a factor that he needs to work on going into next year, and understanding the tyres and how much you can push on them, and sort of managing the tyre wear a little bit better, because I think that's what he's actively said himself as well. But still, I think he should be very, very proud of himself, Oscar. It was a brilliant rookie season.
P8 for me is Oscar Piastri, 6.7. I've seen a lot of lists that have put him maybe very high up. And don't get me wrong, he's had a very good season. He's impressed a lot as a rookie. For him to get a sprint win in his first year when no one really got wins other than Red Bull and particularly Max Verstappen. So incredible performance there in Qatar in the sprint. And then also, once that McLaren got good, he did just get better and better and could match Lando in qualifying a lot of the time, and sometimes in the race pace would drop back a little bit, but what a talent.
P8 for me is Carlos Sainz with a 6.6 average grade. The only driver that wasn't in a Red Bull to win a race this year. I think Carlos has had a decent season. I think it's kind of where I expect him to be in terms of his relative performance to Charles Leclerc. Charles is one of, if not the fastest driver over one lap. And if Carlos can get anywhere near during a Grand Prix weekend, then he's done a really good job. So I don't think he can be too sad about his whole season. And to get that win, obviously, is going to mean a lot to him. And yeah, that's an achievement that nobody else can say that wasn't in the Red Bull camp.
P7 for me is Carlos Sainz with a 6.9. Carlos has had a strange season because if you look at our mid-season driver ratings, he was down in about 12th, I think, for us, and was quite low down. But like you say, he went on that absolutely goated run. But of course, even though he dropped down in that battle to fourth at the end, you're absolutely taking a win all day, every day, and he was the only driver that could do that. And Singapore in particular, we just have to, as we're reflecting on the season, commend that drive, because he was so smart what he did to tow Lando along to stop the quick Mercedes from catching him. It was a brilliant drive and a well-deserved win. So, yeah, overall, I think a good season for Carlos.
P7, George Russell with an average grade of 7 from me. It's not been a great season for George. I think if I was to move him, I'd probably put him P9 on my list, I imagine, above Gasly, but below Piastri and Sainz. But look, he had moments for sure. I think this might have been just a blip of a season for him, because if you look at the season before that, he outscored Hamilton. Of course, Hamilton didn't have the best of luck at times, but I still think he's got the talent, and he'll get there for sure.
P6 for me is Alex Albon with a score of 7 out of 10 average score. Alex was, consistently good. He got a lot of points for Williams, obviously, like all the points. To finish 13th in the championship, of course, at the start of the season, thought Williams would be the worst car by a mile and he'd finish way down the order. But no, he got a lot of points. He's now become a very highly rated driver after essentially being embarrassed by Verstappen, and now he's turned his whole career around. It's really good to see.
P6 for me is Charles Leclerc with a 7.1 average grade. Who's the real Charles Leclerc fanboy on this podcast? We are about to question that. Charles had a pretty decent season. He's made the odd error here and there, but realistically, he's been pushing that car to try and get it to a level that it doesn't belong. It wasn't the 2022 Ferrari at the start of that year. That was a car that was goated, and I thought they were going to win the championship. This year, it's been a bit more of a struggle. They've been obviously great in qualifying, and Leclerc has tried to thrust that car as high as he possibly can in the race. And do I think he is the 6th best driver this year? I'd maybe put him one higher, but that's recency bias.
P5 for me is Charles Leclerc with a 7.3. I think overall he's been very, very good, and particularly at the end of the season, for all the banter about his pole to win ratio, because it's gone on very long now. It's just him putting that car, because he's unbelievable over one lap, and Ferrari are just a less extreme version of Haas, where essentially they can qualify really well but then just don't have any race pace and cook the tyres. He's had a very good, a good year, I'd say. Maybe not very, very good, but he's shown that he is one of the top drivers, definitely.
P5 for me, Alex Albon. What a season this man has had. You go back a few years, and when he was kicked out of Red Bull, you're wondering how on earth is he going to be able to turn his career around. But he did exactly the right thing of going to Williams, and I really hope when he eventually gets that call up to a top team that he doesn't just kind of crumble like he did when he went to Red Bull, and that expectation. Because of course it is, as a ex-F1 driver myself, it's a lot easier to drive for a worse team and perform really well occasionally than it is to drive at a great team and have to deliver great performances every single week where you're under the spotlight. That is something that we have to obviously take into account when we move forward. But of this season, Alex has done a brilliant job, and the average score reflects that.
P4 is Lando Norris with 7.5 out of 10. The start of the season, McLaren weren't really there. It was hard for him to show what he could do, but as soon as that car was there, boy, did he deliver. If I'm not wrong, he's finished second 6 times this season, which is painful because, of course, still doesn't have that first win yet, but he's finished second 6 times in a season where Max basically won everything. But it's a fantastic year, and it just showed, Lando just showed that he is absolutely future. You can say future world champion worthy, even though he's not won a race yet. I don't think that's a fair thing to say, because he's got what it takes, 100%.
P4 for me, Lewis Hamilton with a 7.3 average grade. And I think after the mid-season review, the top 3 felt like they were untouchable. But Hamilton has moved down to 4th for me after the whole season. And interestingly, I look at both of us, and we have not given him 110 the entire year. Neither of us. A lot of 9s, a lot of very consistent great performances, which has obviously got him as high as he has on our charts, on our average grades. But I did find that quite interesting to mention. But give him a good car and Hamilton will perform. And I just hope next year that Mercedes sort it out.
Third for me is Lewis Hamilton with 7.5 out of 10 average score. I think Hamilton's strongest asset, and it's quite clear this year, you take Qatar out of the mix and he's probably finishing easily, comfortably third, because that's a result that's knocked him way down, is his consistency. The fact that he's managed to finish third in the title, even challenging Perez at one point, and it would have been a lot closer without that disqualification in America. He just went on a fantastic run of just bagging points and podiums and things like that. And I can't believe it's now been 2 seasons where Hamilton's not got that win, but he still had a fantastic season, probably quite underrated, I think. Maybe there'll be a few people that are surprised that he's third on my list, but I think he's had a very, very good season indeed, and showed that he can, over a championship, be incredibly consistent, bag the points that he needs even when the car's not there. And yeah, it's been a good season from Hamilton, definitely.
Third for me, Lando Norris with a 7.6 average score. Lando this year has thrust himself into the equation of a potential world champion. He has made mistakes, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure recency bias will, a lot of people will be like, yeah, he's made a lot of mistakes in qualifying, and I completely note that. But he's also pushed that McLaren team forward. And yeah, it's been a brilliant season. I've given him 6 10 out of 10s, but it also shows that because he's not even, he hasn't finished second, that there was a slower start to the year for Norris. I mean, if we just did from the summer break afterwards, he'd be finishing second. But yeah, Lando, very, very good. I can't wait to see what he can do next year. I'm really hopeful for McLaren as a whole next year, and I want to see that win.
P2 is Fernando Alonso with an average of 7.8. His start to the year was absolutely unbelievable. 6 podiums in the first 8 races. And then, of course, it dropped off a bit. They weren't quite the same car, but even then he was still scoring solid points finishes. I'm still absolutely gutted that he didn't get that win, because I'd have loved to have seen it. But if you'd have told me at the start of the season, even though I predicted that right at the last minute that I think his Aston move might actually be for the better, I could have never predicted that he'd end up with like 8 podium finishes and finish 4th in the world title. Like, fair play, the man has still got it 100%, and I just hope the Aston is even better next year, but I'm not holding out much hope.
For P2, Fernando Alonso with a 7.7 average score. Alonso was so good, as you say, at the start of the year. The Aston fell off, which was such a shame. I would have loved to have seen a full season of Fernando Alonso right at the front fighting Max Verstappen. But he almost delivered every single week without fail. I think there's a few moments, obviously Singapore being one of them, Mexico being another. But apart from that, I mean, just stunning to watch Fernando Alonso do what he does best.
P1, start playing the Dutch national anthem now.
Drum roll, please.
Who could it be? Is, of course, Max Verstappen with a pathetic average of just 9.7 out of 10 over a 22 race season. I saw a lot of people replying to a tweet I did about it's the greatest season there's ever been by a driver, and of course the Twitter warriors will always try and discredit things and stuff, but if you're a Hamilton fan or you think Schumacher's the best or whatever and you're discrediting Max's season, you're discrediting your favourite drivers, because they haven't been able to do what Max has done in a dominant car. So if you're insulting Max, you're insulting them as well, because it's just diminishing their achievements as well, which is completely unfair. His season has been unbelievable. I found essentially a bunch of stats that he's broken. So obviously we all know that he's broken the win record, win percentage, which is 86.3 which is absolutely bonkers, which beats Ascari's record from 1952. Consecutive wins that he got, of course. Most podiums. He's now scored the most points scored in consecutive races, which is 1,004, which beats Hamilton's record between 2018 and 2020. He's got the most points in a season this year. He's got the percentage of points in a season, which is 92.7% of all points you could possibly get. He got this season, which shows that even in sprints and fastest laps and everything, and sprints, wins, all that kind of stuff, he's done that as well. Percentage of laps led, he's broken Jim Clark's record from 1963. Wins from pole, broken Nigel Mansell's record from 92. Races left winning the title only equalled Michael Schumacher's record from 2002, which I'm sure you'd be pleased about.
My guy Schumacher.
He's now, much to everyone's disgust, has been championship leader for 39 races in a row now, which beats Schumacher's record. The last time someone else led was Spain 2022, not sure who that was. Biggest gap to second in the championship. 290 points beating from 2013. Percentage of points between first and second, 50%, which beats Nigel Mansell's record from 92, and he's now also got the longest streak of converting poles to win, which is 16. It's just the best season ever, and I don't know how you can dispute it.
My P1, drumroll again, is Max Verstappen with an average score of 9.6 washed. I am a Schumacher fanboy through and through. And yet, this season was the most incredible thing I've ever seen from a driver. The consistency, the perfection that he showed on almost every single Grand Prix weekend is, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, I don't think we'll see this again. Max, of course, had a car that worked really well to his liking, but his teammate wasn't finishing second every time. We know it's not an easy car to drive. Okay, it might be suited to his driving style. It doesn't win the race for him. It doesn't win 19 out of 22 races in a Grand Prix season. That's never happened before. If you're slandering Max Verstappen because you are Team LH or Team whoever you might be, just check yourself for a second, because they've probably had a dominant season as well. They've had several dominant seasons if they're Lewis Hamilton. Just put some respect on his name. We're not saying that Lewis Hamilton isn't a great champion or a great winner or a great statistical GOAT. No, he's done his job those many years ago. Max is doing the job right now, and we have to appreciate that, because if we don't, it's just doing him a disservice, to be honest with you. And he'll play it down. Yeah, whatever, we'll go for the next win. But he knows deep down what he's done as well. And thoroughly impressive. I hope we never see it again, because I want competitiveness at the front. But it has happened, and we have to respect it. Let's go to the non-full-time drivers then, because there's a couple of them. Liam Lawson, the average score was 7.8 from 5 races. I thought he was really good. He has proven in those 5 races that he deserves a full-time Formula 1 seat, and if he is not on the grid in 2025, it is an absolute disaster.
Yeah, Liam Lawson got a 7.6 from me from the 5-race average. Of course, it's skewed quite a lot that he's done very little races, but he delivered in those races. You know, he got into that car in probably the most difficult race he could have imagined at the Dutch Grand Prix, delivered a brilliant result, and then ended up, scoring some points in Singapore, which was an incredibly tough race as well. So yeah, Liam did a fantastic job.
And then finally, Daniel Ricciardo, who's got an average score of 6.4 from me from 7 races. Daniel Rick's done a good job. He's had a couple of meh weekends, and he's had a couple of really good weekends. And I'm hopeful for next year that Danny Rick can really get on top of the car and continue to grow and perform. I don't think he should or will be going to Red Bull anytime soon, but let's see how it all unfolds.
I had 6.7 average from 7 races for Daniel Ricciardo. Tough to kind of rate his season, because sometimes he had some incredible races and then sometimes looked a bit average, but I think that was just from the fact that his comeback was very stop-start. Looking forward to next year, and I think we'll get a better indication of just how good Daniel Ricciardo is when he has a full season under his belt.
Lovely stuff, and that is it. Thank you, everybody, one and all, for coming to this big old chat around the drivers and how we rated them from worst to best and their average grades. Let us know your thoughts. I'm sure you have already. And I hope you have enjoyed this series. If you have, please let us know in the comments. And leave a like as well. That would be amazing. And subscribe if you haven't already, because there's lots more content coming over the course of of December, and then of course going into next year as well in the new season. Tommy, what are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts are, thank you so much for agreeing with every single order of my list. But joking aside, it's been fun to reminisce about the season. Not been the greatest season of all, but we'll have a lot more review content because there is a lot to talk about, and we love waffling about Formula One, even though there's no Formula One for 96 days now.
Stop reminding us, Tommy. And on that note, we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.